And so now you're probably thinking, he was going to explain cause and effect in astrotometry, and now I'm just plain confused. Because in a very real sense, what causes the particle, there's a sort of sustenance, a sort of sustaining factor in the nature of the curvature of time, just as it relates to the persistence of the Earth as a sphere in space. And so if this is h, or hypertime, there's a cycle that repeats depending on whatever scale. So there's a scalar factor that has to do with the relationship of this node pattern, whatever it is, to every other node pattern. And this circular hypertime relationship mirrors the very circular nature, or the spherical nature, of our planet. And so this hypertime relationship indicates something about the nature of cause and effect. But what is it? Because according to what I'm saying, this movement through hypertime is happening in two directions. While it may appear to us, because of the way we're moving through space, that this time is moving this way, what I've said about the nature of these waveforms is that it is an underlying carrier wave that is responsible for the photon observation. So the observation of the photon itself has to do with the nature of this wave right here. This node, these six movements that a single thing makes through space to be perceiving a click in time. So you've got the movement of one photon as perceived by this observer is its translation in 6 different directions through space to another point in space. Let's just call this the point A and the point B. And we're just going to abstract where this is. We don't know where this is. It may be very, very difficult to calculate where this is. But so this is point B. Point A, point B. Where is this? Does it matter? That's one of the most interesting things in astrotometry is, does this really matter where this is? Because it falls out in this sort of persistence that the Earth seems to have through time. The persistence of matter is incredibly durable. And this is something that in scientific circles is observed a lot, that the durability of this illusion is incredible. And so you've got this other moment in space, time, for this particle, for this thing, this pattern. It's called a node pattern or a space particle, alternatively in astrotometry. And so the node pattern in A and the node pattern in B is related to the movement of not this wave, but the underlying carrier wave that moves back and forth. And so there's in a single undulation, this is moving back and forth. It goes one way and then another. And so there's this translation through space that moves what this is, makes the apparent movement of this through time. And so in hypertime, these things are moving in both directions. And so you can't just draw it in one direction. So the coronal hole on the sun, if this is the sun, you see the coronal hole on the sun. The movement that will be happening on the Earth is related to its past movement. And so this interference pattern that is seen in the higher frequency energy from the matter moving through being translated inconsistently through the hypertime. This is a hypertime inconsistency. And so the inconsistency in that frequency relationship is bidirectional. And so you have to ask, what is happening? How is cause and effect happening if these waves have no control over how they are interfering? And to understand that, you have to understand the concept of astrotometric translation. There's a selection among the three-dimensional worlds that is happening on this level. It's this rest phase that in a sense determines the world that this is going to be translated to. And so in other words, there's a world relative transformation that is happening. And if you analyze our physical world, this is what we experience. We experience a translation of our world. If we just turn around, we see the whole world turn with us. And this sort of translation happens not just on the physical level, but happens on every level. And so there is this relationship with the astrotometric translation of this object that has to do with this selection pattern, how this pattern is selected, that gives this thing a certain amount of determination on where it is going to go. So in a sense, it is the relationship that this has with everything else that will determine where it gets translated to astrometrically. And so from the imagining the 10th dimension perspective, it's these universal sources I guess it would be universal, technically universal sources of these forms that select I think Rob said the meme and the physical relationship patterns that sort of determine the universe or the world that we're in, which is the method of our freedom or perceived freedom of movement and the manifestation that we exert on the nature of the universe. But in astrotometry, it's similar to this with an underlying mechanism for this that can be abstracted. In other words, you can abstract this to be, in a sense, the center of a double. You could say that this is a double three-dimensional world. In other words, you could say that there are two things here. Since this is going in two directions, you could say that this is one and this is two. It's sort of describing the same thing in a different way. I think this is a much more physical way to describe it. Whereas when you're working with something symbolically, abstractly, sometimes having a more general or a more simplistic abstraction allows you to work with it more simply. Just depends on what your preference is, I guess, in some sense, or what the task is. I think that's a lot of times the way science is that we have different types of sciences, different types of ways of understanding the nature of the universe or imagining the nature of the universe to accomplish different things. The implications are that the way that this type of causal relationship is selected, the way that cause and effect plays out, is by the actual selection of the hypersymmetric version of the universe. In other words, there are all these multiple worlds, these multiple Earths that exist throughout the astrotome, and this mechanism is how we travel among them, which is also the way that we exert, in a sense, our free will on the universe itself.